trzymaj się.
This video is going to provide an introduction to the boating navigation rules targeted towards the local recreational boater. As background to the navigation rules, we'll look at the different classes of vessels. All vessels can be organized into a set of classes, where the different classes have different privileges in terms of their operation on the water. We'll use a pyramid to relate the different classes of vessels. On the left side of the page is a privilege arrow that indicates that the class of vessels lower in the pyramid have less privilege than the class of vessels higher in the pyramid and need to avoid those vessels when operating. The class of vessels at the bottom of the pyramid, that is with the lowest of privileges, is power. Power vessels are vessels with mechanical propulsion, such as a runabout or a motorboat or a sailboat with its engine on, or a dinghy with its engine on, or large powered vessels. The next class of vessels in the pyramid, located above power, is sail. Sail are vessels using wind power. Example of sail vessels include auxiliary sailboat with the engine off, a sailing dinghy, a windsurfer, a kiteboard, etc. The third class of vessels with higher privilege above sail and above power are muscle vessels. Muscle vessels are vessels using human propulsion. Examples include a rowboat, a kayak, a canoe, a dinghy with a not operating engine, a paddle boat, etc. And we can include swimmers in this group. So these three classes of vessels represent most of the vessels we'll see in our day-to-day boating. However, there are additional classes of vessels that aren't too common, so let's add an additional pyramid on top of the one we've just covered, and we'll discuss what those classes are. The first class of vessels in this new pyramid are fishing vessels. Fishing vessels are defined as commercial vessels actively engaged in fishing, where the fishing gear restricts the ability of the vessel to maneuver. Examples will include a vessel with a trawl, nets, lines, or other fishing gear deployed, a lobster boat working its parts, etc. This class of vessels does not include recreational pleasure boats out fishing for the afternoon and trailing a line or two, although it may be courteous for the boater to avoid such vessels. Above fishing is a class of vessels called restricted inability to maneuver, or RAM. Vessels restricted inability to maneuver are vessels whose nature of work causes them to be restricted in their ability to maneuver. Now, we'll include in this class also vessels which are constrained by their draft, vessels that need deep water who are operating in a channel or an area of shallow water. Examples of this class of vessel include the Coast Guard buoy maintenance vessel, a working tugboat, a dredge, or any deep draft vessel operating in a channel. The last class of vessels, which are at the very top of the privilege pyramid, are vessels not under command. Examples of vessels not under command would include a vessel with a rudder problem, or a vessel with engine failure, or perhaps something like a vessel with the crew on strike. So here we have 6 different classes of vessels. Starting from the bottom with power, these vessels have the lowest privilege of operation on the water, going up through the 6 classes to the top, vessels not under command, which have the highest privilege. We have a ranking of vessels, all of which need to give right of way to the vessels which are above them in the hierarchy. So let's take a look at some of the key terms used in the navigation rules. The first is the stand-on vessel. The stand-on vessel is obligated to maintain her speed and course. The second is the give-way vessel. The give-way vessel is obligated to take action to avoid the stand-on vessel. And finally, what action is the give-way obligated to take? that action is an early and obvious change of course or speed or both. Note that the give-way vessel is not expected to wait until the last second to make a minor change of course to avoid the stand-on vessel. Its action is expected to be both early and obvious. To finish this introduction to the ColRegs, I'd like to offer some advice about the navigation rules. The first piece of advice is always avoid a collision. In any circumstance where you find yourself the stand-on vessel and some operator of a give-way vessel is either not paying attention or unaware of the rules, always takes action to avoid a collision. Being right is never any compensation for the risk of damage to your boat or to your loved ones. The second piece of advice is always avoid large vessels in open water. This advice is sometimes referred to as the law of tonnage or might makes right. If you have a large commercial vessel bearing towards you, it can be prudent to just get out of their way. If possible, communicate with the vessel in Channel 13 to discuss what action you may be taking. You can check your AIS receiver or a phone app like Boat Beacon to get the name of the vessel and then have an appropriate conversation with the captain. Third piece of advice is, if you're the give-way vessel in a crossing situation, often the best way to give way is to turn your boat towards the stern of the crossing vessel and maintain that course pointed towards the stern of the crossing vessel as the vessel passes in front of you. By making this change of course, your action is clear and obvious to the stand-on vessel, and after the stand-on vessel has passed, you'll find yourself back on course, having only made a boat length or two of extra distance. I hope you find this introduction to ColRegs useful, and be sure to watch Part 2, Powerboat Rules, and Part 3, Sailing Rules. Thank you.